Okay, let's start. Now we are still on no peace among nations without peace among religions. And we have heard, all the news, the attacks in Montreal, the attacks in Ottawa, the attacks in New York, the attacks in Washington, the attacks in Jerusalem. Hello, welcome to the club. You are brave in this bad weather. So our problem still goes on, and Pope Francis and the Christian Jews and Muslims in the Near East and at home, that is our theme, discourse number 3 tonight. And then we have one more, 4th, the next time. And the next time afterwards, we will go to the Roadhouse and celebrate, and you're all invited. Now we have this reading, and we had the reading from the Sermon on the Mount, because we wanted to have the starting point. When we talk in the Christian paradigm, then we have to have the starting point, like if we would in Islam, we would start with the Holy Quran, and in the Jewish community, we would start with the Torah, and so we start out with the Sermon on the Mount. You have learned, we mentioned already the last time about murder. Jesus repeats the Mosaic law, you should not murder, and then he moves from a traditional ethics to an intentionality ethics, already to say, you communist, you extremist, means already to have killed the other. And so we jump over this taking oath there, we mentioned that already also. You have learned how it was said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, that is the lex talionis or the jus talionis. But I say this to you, offer the wicked man no resistance. On the contrary, if anyone hits you on the right cheek, offer him the other as well. If a man takes you to law and would have your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone orders you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles with him. Give to anyone who asks, and if anyone wants to borrow, do not turn away. That is one thing, and then we want to add the other one. The 5th commandment of Jesus, you have learned how it was said. That means to Moses and to the prophets, you must love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say this to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. In this way you will be sons of your Father in heaven, for he causes his sun to rise at bad men as well as good, and his rain to fall on honest and dishonest men alike. For if you love those who love you, what right have you to claim any credit? Even the tax collectors do as much, do they not? And if you have your greetings for your brothers, are you doing anything exceptional? Even the pagan do as much, do they not? You must therefore be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect. So we have to add something here. And hate your enemy is not in the Torah. That is a wrong quotation. Jesus had a rabbinical education, but maybe not sufficient. So that was an Aramaic saying, which was around there when Jesus lived, and he spoke Aramaic. So it really meant your enemy you don't have to love. That is what was around. But it's not in the book Leviticus or anywhere else. So that is one thing. And then this examine there about when somebody asked you to go 1 mile, that was a Roman soldier, the occupation force. So they asked sometimes people to carry their weapons for 1 mile, and Jesus then said, well, go with them 2 miles. So how this has to be translated nowadays, that is another question. We also have to see what Jesus himself did. So whenever somebody gives us a law, then we also have to see how he himself practices that. So Jesus was before the Sanhedrin, and somebody, the servant of the high priest, did beat him on the right cheek, and he did not hold up the left cheek. So, but he asked, why do you strike me? Why do you beat me? And so on. So that means one must use reason in the interpretation of what has been said. And also Paul, who was Jesus' disciple, who had never saw him, because when he studied under Gamaliel in Jerusalem, Jesus was not there any longer. And when Jesus taught, he was in Tarsus, in what is Turkey today. So they never met. But he had this conversion after Paul had been a mass murderer for some time for the Sanhedrin. He had this conversion in Syria and Damascus and became a Christian then. And but he was also beaten. He was beaten in the Sanhedrin on both cheeks, and he didn't hold up any of them. But he did something very nasty. He jumped up and he said, "This is why I'm accused here. It is for the resurrection's sake." And so he knew exactly that the Sadducees, which have been annihilated, our rabbis here are all Pharisees, and the Pharisees believed in the resurrection, but the Sadducees did not. And he knew that they would get into each other's beards and would attack each other, and so they did. And then he went even further and appealed to the pagan authority, the emperor, to be tried by the emperor rather than by the Sanhedrin and so on. So we have to take theory and praxis together if we want to interpret those things adequately. But then we would have to apply it. What is Israel supposed to do? What are we supposed to do when we are attacked? So we hold up the other cheek, and then people right away say, well, that doesn't go, that is not practical. As a matter of fact, the imams would say this is wonderful, and we should do that, but only privately. So both religions, Islam and Judaism, think that this is something which individuals can do, and they are very saintly, but a nation cannot do that. It is impractical as far as politics is concerned, because people will right away argue, as Cheney will always do there, who has mentioned that several times, that the others think you are weak, and then the situation becomes even worse. So the rabbis say the same thing. So nevertheless, we have to rethink what this would mean when we apply it to our situations today. It is the position of strength, as Nietzsche would say, only from a position of strength that can be taken seriously. So the state of Israel, for instance, 10 times, 100 times more powerful than the Palestinians. They have the bomb and so on. So it is easier for the Israelis to take a few miserable Russian rockets, which cannot even be steered and have hit anybody, and then wait for it and not right away strike back and then take 20 times more ice than they have lost. They have lost the last time 70 soldiers, the Israelis, and because they invaded Gaza, and 2,000, almost 2,000 civilian casualties in Gaza. So that is not eye for eye. That is 100 eyes for one eye and more. So, so that how that is. There are many political scientists who try to translate this, what this would mean in terms of conflict resolution and peace resolution. And I just wrote an article there for the Russians about this. So, but we don't have to go into this here in detail. Okay, that was our reading for today, and we want just to repeat very shortly what we did the last time. In our second discourse, we emphasized thought before action. We have this American activism, and we want to fix things very fast, and now we cannot fix it. Yesterday we bombed Syria, and we bombed our own friends. We bombed the whole building down, of a party, of a group, which really is against ISIS and is against the government, and we bombed them, and now the Syrians are all upset. They have no idea what we do and how confused we are, and so on. And so it's every day. So therefore, we have to think things through before we strike or bomb or whatever. This reaction all the time, that does not solve anything. So that means we emphasize this anthropological thing, that we can think, that we can transcend, that we are not chained to the particulars. Our chimpanzee ancestors had only particular chimpanzees, particular trees, particular stones, and so on. They could not think species or genus concepts. These concepts were missing. So we can do that. We can transcend the particular. We must not go from one thing to the other. And it happened in Ottawa, where they run over a policeman and killed a soldier, and then they run over 2 policemen in the other city up there, Montreal, and then they did the same thing with an axe and so on and so on. So when we get lost in these details and repeat it, it becomes awfully awfully boring and so on, and we become even insensitized to these tragic cases and so on. So we can penetrate the particulars and we can see that there is something universal behind this, and that is what we try to do. And we had two universals where we practiced this, and one was modernity, and the other one was the heartland theory, and we could add to this also capitalism here, because that is one of those universals. We had this catastrophic election yesterday, in which shows the whole master-servant relationship in this country, how long it will take until the 250 million workers in this country will be able to liberate themselves and become equal to their masters and so on. Yesterday, an unbelievable step backward again, and somehow we can say that in history, slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and so on are stages of learning. It is a hard learning process in which those who are on the bottom have to fight their way up slowly, and yesterday they fought backward. That means they supported their masters, and that was a very tragic thing again, but that happened before to the bourgeoisie, that happened before to the serfs, it happened before to the slaves. It is part of this educational struggle in which we work ourselves out of nature, from animality to freedom, and we are far from it, and the election last night brought us even further away than we were a week before this. So, but we can talk about this other universal capitalism and so on, so not this detail and this businessman does this and whatever, but that we see in all these particularities the system. Universal is the same thing like the system which is at work. So the tragedy for Obama, who does now the exact opposite of whatever he wanted to do, there we see certainly a decent man and a humanistic person and a peacemaker and whatever, but we see the power of the system, the power of the universal, against which even the president cannot do much. So, but we can talk about this later. So, but the main thing what we emphasized last time too is this antagonism of the sacred and the profane. I heard last night in the Mars thing, the Bill Maher's show there, where an Islamic woman said, I'm a secular Islamic person, or a secular Muslim. This is, of course, a nonsense statement and so on. So there is no, what cannot be a secular Christian or a secular Jew or whatever. This is all nonsense. Since 400 years, only in this area, only in the West, this antagonism happened between the secular and the religious, and we had it right away in the movies, which we showed in the beginning. It is the heart of our critical theory of religion, which we too and others have developed in the last 50 years or so, and which starts with the antagonism between the religious and the secular. And it has not happened in China, it has not happened in Greece, it has not happened anywhere. There's Walter. Greetings, Walter. We are happy that you are here. And so it has only happened here. Now, of course, it is globalized, and therefore all these struggles in Africa and the Near East and Indonesia and so on, where world religions like Christianity did before, so now Islam and so on, react against this modernization process or secularization process, which is indeed hostile to all of them. And we said that behind the Near East, the Islamic people don't want to have the same happen to them, which has happened to Christianity here, which is in a most pitiful situation. If you compare Catholicism today here, there's only a shadow of what Catholicism was in 1200 or 1400, even before the Reformation and so on. So that they don't want to have that fate. So, and then very important that this antagonism then brings splits also into the religious communities. And so what we see in the Near East from day to day is that suddenly two split organizations are uniting then against us. And so ISIS suddenly yesterday united itself with another group and so on. So that means they were all split in terms of their attitude toward the West, their attitude toward modernization and so on. And then they say we are both equally threatened by it, and that brings them together. The more we bomb, the more they get together. in Germany. I was in the bombardments. The more the Allies bombed, the more people were together and were fighting and so on. Because when you are threatened by the same enemy from outside, that unites you, of course. So, so we have nevertheless this antagonism between the religious and the secular. That brings antagonisms inside of the groups, like in Catholicism. Of one side, Benedict XVI, who broke down. He made an all-out attack against modernity and just failed inside of the church and outside. And so we had on one side Benedict, and we had Hans Küng on the other side, and we had Metz on the other side, the father of the liberation theology. So Catholicism is split in the middle, and Benedict threw out 90 priests, 90 of our best theologians were excommunicated and so on, and all went in another church, in the Anglican Church and so on. So that is catastrophic, of course, and we see if this new Pope, if he can heal those splits, and we want to discuss that a little bit today. But we have splits also in modernity itself. There's the modern bourgeoisie, makes a revolution against the feudal lords, and then there's the modern working class who makes a revolution against the bourgeoisie. In China, in North Vietnam, in Cuba, it was in Russia, and coming back in Russia again. So that is another split. So on one side we have the religious community split, on the other side we have also the secular community split in terms of different waves of enlightenment. There's the bourgeois enlightenment, which this third estate, the middle class, carried through, and the fourth estate was forgotten. The fourth estate, which voted wrong again yesterday with a false consciousness. They think wrongly about themselves. They don't know who the hell they are themselves. They are 250 million people who don't even have any representation. They are represented by the third estate in Congress. And there are two possibilities. There are the Roosevelt liberals, who are a little bit more in sympathy with them, and they voted in yesterday the neoliberals on the other side. You cannot vote more idiotically. And particularly older people like me voted wrongly. I went to Friendship Village, and they were all my friends. They have no oxygen anymore, but they did the last patriotic duty they had and voted for the wrong party. So, I mean, this is just catastrophic, this whole thing. And in this international mess, you know, we have this internal mess, what is called the false consciousness, where masses of people vote on a completely false consciousness, which one could, of course, study where this is coming from, that the older ones have it more than the younger ones. Of course, they have been conditioned by the system longer than the younger ones, so therefore they voted even more wrongly than the others. Okay, so that was an important thing for us yesterday, and the movies helped, hopefully. And then we are not only concerned with these antagonisms, but we want to go further to the reconciliation of this antagonism. So that is what is called dialectics. And so how can that be possibly reconciled, or will we become totally secular? Like, for instance, we say K College is a Baptist college, but there's not much left of baptism. The Catholic college disappeared completely. The two hospitals, one is Methodist, the other one is Catholics. They are very thinner and thinner in their Methodism and their Catholicism. So you can see almost in the 50 years I was here, I can see how every institution gets step by step more and more secularized. So it's possible that the religious community slowly and nicely and in a friendly way is just pushed out of the public sphere. And then they can sit there as private organizations. I mean, we have still in Persia or in Iran, we have still the Zoroastrianism. There are 100,000 Zoroastrians sitting there, living peaceful life, but they are not in the public sphere. They make no contribution to the evolution of the species any longer or whatever. So that is a possibility. The other one is an attempt, you know, to introduce Sharia law in different countries, and it has been done already. Or here we have people who want to put the book Leviticus instead of the Constitution and so on. It's not very likely that this probable that this will happen. And then is the issue: can one reconcile it? And reconciliation means, of course, that not everything what these religions have now can pass the threshold. So the question if religion can be superseded into secularity. Wherever science has good evidence, for instance, I have a son who is a homosexual, and he's convinced that homosexuality is something biological and people are born with it. if science would come to the point where they could prove that really, then of course the book Leviticus goes down the drain and so on. If somebody can prove that different families in Africa evolved at the same time, and the Bible says only one family, then of course the whole teaching on the original sin and redemption and so on gets shaky, and it's shaky since 20 years, and already Karl Rahner addressed that in the 20s and 30s and so on. So most people are not even concerned with that, and maybe they don't have to, but nevertheless, when one wants to really be serious about that, then one has to see this development. And so every day we have a culture war about Catholics not wanting to pay for birth control, a hobby or whatever, won the thing even, and so sometimes there is a step back and then it goes 2 steps forward again. The overall trend is secularization. So in a reconciliation, both sides would have to give in. And I think I gave an example like stem cell research where they have something in common which is good for the reconciliation. They both, the secular side, the medical doctors and so on, they want to heal people, Alzheimer's, and then they need these cells for the healing process, and they need indeterminate cells, so they take an embryo, fertilize it, an egg, fertilize it, and then after 2 weeks they kill it after they have taken out the element. And for the religious person, that is murder, and so therefore there is a discrepancy, it's an antagonism. That is one of millions of antagonisms, and so, but they have that in common. The goal, the religious people have nothing against healing people this way, but the question is, what is the means? And the means are not sanctified by the goal, and therefore there are problems. But they also have in common that the embryo is human. It's not a chimpanzee one. The difference is only 2 or 3% of the genome, but there is a difference. And then they come to the point where the religious people think it is a person, and then we have to follow the argumentation. There are psalms where God says, "And from your womb I have blessed you," and so on and so on. And from that they conclude that there is already personhood in the womb, and so therefore that is where they do not agree now, and then they have to pin it down. Here it is where we have to cannot agree or must agree to disagree, but even then one does not have to stop it, because religion changes all the time and also science changes all the time. So the religious people think the embryo is a person already before birth. The others think the embryo becomes a person only in interaction between the embryo and the persons outside, the father, mother, nurse, and doctor, and so on. And through this interaction, then the ego is constituted, is differentiated from the id, from the little chimpanzee, which remains there, and from the superego, on the other hand, which is slowly formed according to the culture, and so on. So that is how modern people think. And if modern people, for instance, would reintroduce the idea of teleology again, purposiveness, which they threw out in the 18th century revolution, scientific revolution, then they would be closer again to each other, because one would say that potentially the embryo is a person and slowly evolves through 80 years or whatever if you don't interrupt it by an abortion. And then there would be a step closer to each other. But it hasn't spread yet, so Uexküll is still relatively alone with his thesis, but we don't know what the other scientists will do. The Big Bang theory was developed by a Belgian priest, and in the meantime it has been accepted by almost everybody. So okay, so that is our point there, the antagonism and the reconciliation of this antagonism, and what we can do, and what the Pope can do, and what the Church can do, and what the Muslims can do, and the Jews, and so on. Now we want to go to some contemporary issues, and we could go to many of them. There is, of course, the election I mentioned already, and then we could go about all this killing in Jerusalem, and before in Washington, before in New York, and Montreal, and so on. There's obviously system behind all this, right? They are concentrating now police, particularly, and army, The police is the highest level of civil society. Civil society consists of neat system, administration of justice, and the police. So that the police is the conclusion of civil society. So they hit at the conclusion a very vulnerable type of a point in civil society. And since it is the same thing in Canada and in Jerusalem and so on, you see there is a whole front behind it. You know, it's not there's Hamas and it's this and this and this. Then we get caught with the particulars, but we have to see that there is in these particulars there is something universal, namely the attack, counterattack against modernity, which supposedly has attacked Islam and other world religions as well, and it has. So sometimes we are not only not aware, sufficiently aware. Mahak last night there, the Islamic woman showed him that he didn't know anything about Sufism and Hamas and nothing. He had no idea, has no clue what religion is, but he fights against it all the time. So it's not only that we don't know anything about religion, what is worse, we don't even know about us, because we are split here. On one side, the state evolution is all enlightenment, but civil society had all these little groups, Baptist, Methodist, and so on, and was religious and so on, so to some extent. So, but the name of God doesn't even appear in the Constitution, and the name of God appears in the Declaration of Independence, but it's a deistic God, which has nothing to do with Islam, Judaism, or Christianity. That's our civil religion, which held us together, and which is now under attack by fundamentalism, which is very bad. Okay, so then we don't have to go to this. We can do that next time when you want to or whenever you want to. But one thing I wanted to take out, and there is a new thing which Dustin made me pay attention to it, and that is the this wonderful picture here. And I can even give one of you, and you can look at it. It's a real friendly picture, and this friendliness, the Pope, as the Jesuits cannot sing, as you know, right? And so when they celebrate a Mass, it's almost a horrible thing, but their Masses are very short. So a Jesuit is the only one who can celebrate a Mass in 15 minutes, and his singing is awful. So, but a religion consists of the cognitive side and of the normative side and the expressive side. He's very good. He expresses himself very well. So there he is good. He shakes hands and holds babies, as Mussolini did too. They all do the same thing. So there you can look at this picture there. And while I look at this and we want to see how true this is and we can have a discussion about it, you can just break in whenever you want to. So that is our contemporary issue. I'm not a communist, he says to the press. He was in a meeting in Rome for movements, popular movements or whatever, and he gave a speech, so just a short time ago. I'm not a communist. Is that true? He's a Jesuit. A Jesuit is a monastic order. All monastic orders are communistic. So he is a communist. Why doesn't he say it? So from the very beginning, Christianity was communistic. Here, let me just read you a little thing here. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Acts there. It says it even twice, so I don't have to tell you twice. So it is under 2, and then the same thing or similar thing comes up under 4 once more in the Acts. The early Christian community, the early Christian community. So, you know, whoever wrote it, Luke wrote it, maybe, he had to tell us twice that Christianity is communistic. So here it says, these remain faithful to the teaching of the apostles, to the brotherhood, to the breaking, like the Islamic Brotherhood, for instance, to the breaking of bread and to the prayers. So they went to the temple, the Christians in Jerusalem went to the temple, and then they went home, and then they broke the bread and drank the wine and celebrated the Last Supper of Jesus, which was the celebration of the Egyptian liberation, which Jesus as a Jew celebrated. So they broke bread and wine, and then the many miracles and signs worked through the apostles made a deep impression on everyone in Jerusalem. The faithful all lived together and owned everything in common. That is communism. They sold their goods and possessions and shared out the proceeds among themselves according to what each one needed. From everybody according to ability to everybody according to need is what Karl Marx took from the Acts as the basis of communism. Okay. They went as a body to the temple every day, but met in their houses for the breaking of bread. They shared their food gladly and generously. They praised God and were looked up to by everyone. Day by day, the Lord added to their community those destined to be saved. The early Christian community, there's the other text, the whole group of believers was united, heart and soul. No one claimed for his own use anything that he had, as everything they owned was held in common. The apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus with great power. That means Jesus had provoked the rich and the powerful, and they killed him. By the way, not by an assassination like Kennedy, but legally. That was a fantastic thing. So the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of Jesus with great power and so on. None of their members was ever in want, as all those who owned land or houses would sell them and bring the money from them to present it to the apostles. It was then distributed to any members who might be in need, from everybody according to his want, his ability, to everybody according to his need. And then, of course, Ananias and Sapphira, they cheated. And that is not very humorous, and I don't want to tell you about it, but they sold their thing and then didn't give everything to the apostle Peter, and therefore Ananias got a heart attack, and then she came in and Sapphira, and she got a heart attack too. That was the punishment for not being communists. It was really the punishment for pretending to be a communist and not being one. So that is the gospel. And so, therefore, the Pope says, just following the gospel. Just following the gospel is exactly being a communist. That is the funny type of a thing. But it's not the Pope's fault now, right? So slaveholder systems, feudal systems, capitalist systems are untrue systems. In these untrue systems, true sentences become wrong, wrong sentences become right. And everything is absolutely confused. So you have to see, when you talk, see a speaker making speech acts which perform certain things, you always have to think that this happened in a system, and a system which is not a true system as long as it is not equal. That means as long as you have classes, as long as you have a bourgeois upper class which are full of contempt to the 49% of welfare loafers, and so on and so on. And that was reinforced yesterday or Tuesday. So, okay, so now some other things. I'm not a communist, just following the gospel. One is not true, the other one is true. He should have said, I'm a communist because I'm following the gospel. That would be the right thing. But he could not possibly have said this. So you cannot say the truth in the untrue system. Okay, so Pope Francis denied being a communist at a meeting in Rome yesterday, saying that he simply urges activism against the structural causes of poverty and follows Christian doctrine. Two things, of course, these are all so-called universals, right? There's some systematic things. The liberation theologians, founded by my friend Metz, Sebastian Metz, Baptist Metz, and he wants to be called Baptist all the time. I brought him here with the help of K College, and we had a wonderful day here, 2 days, 3 days, really. He gave a speech at night in your chapel, and then he had a discussion with the Baptist ministers, and that didn't go so well. They asked him, why are we on earth? And poor Baptist got a nervous breakdown. He was supposed to celebrate the Mass. He's a priest. Celebrate the Mass for my wife, Margie, and he couldn't do it. He just had a nervous breakdown. I had to carry him back practically to the hotel downtown and bring him up again next day, and they had to rest all day long for what the Baptist ministers had done to him. The primitivity of this area here is just overwhelming. And I said, dear Baptist, I have lived here 40 years, and I'm still healthy. I have to go twice to Europe at least, but see what happens to you now in 2 days. This is unforgivable. Well, he recovered again afterwards, and so it wasn't too bad, the whole thing. So, but nevertheless, from this comes a structural change. So when we think of capitalism, then first of all, we didn't use that word for a long time, but since 10 years or whatever, since the catastrophe of 2008, in the finance market, people are talking about it again a little bit more. So this, but usually when thought about Dickens, for instance, the greediness, capitalists are greedy or whatever, that would be small things if it was only that. What has happened in capitalism is that the greed has become objectivated. That means it is structural greed now. It's not only this or that capitalism, but some capitalists can even be good thing and give money to K College or whatever, or to Western or whatever. So it is not the individual guy who may even control his greed, may get frightened that the Lord will put him into eternal fire and then give something good or whatever, from like we have that new medical school. So, so that it's not the individual. He has to find his own salvation. It is a system. See, that's why it's so important that we talked about the universal the last time, right? Because when you get caught in particulars, you miss it all. So he is, therefore, they call that structural sins. That means it is not the individual, but it is the system which is through and through sinful. That means there is no ethics on earth which can justify ethically the capitalistic system. That means the appropriation of surplus value by non-workers of the workers. So that the girl in whatever, in Colonial Kitchen there, she gets $25 on Monday, and she produces $175 going to the pocket of the non-working owner, and so on and so on. So that is the core, so that it cannot even be reformed. If you would do away with the surplus value, if the Islamic people under the law of usury would modify it that way as they try to, then nothing would remain of it. So it cannot be reformed. So it can be covered up. That means you can get a rich guy gives a few million, and that is helpful for tax deduction and also for public relations. We had that the first time, I think by 1860, 70, whatever, the Rockefellers shot 250 miners in some state somewhere, and the opinion about the rich was zero, unlike yesterday. And so then they invented this public relations stuff and what the rich people do for the others. And so they give a few percentage, which is what they have robbed in surplus value, give it back to those who then admire them and so on. So that ruins charity. Of course, the most beautiful word in Christianity is charity. As soon as it is functionalized in public relations, it becomes a mess. So nevertheless, that is what is meant here, structural causes. So it's structural sins, that means surplus value. We don't teach that word, because when you have the universal, then suddenly the students could see the system. If you don't have the word, you don't know, you are just caught in particulars. And they are very contradictory, so you are confused. All my students are confused all the time. So that comes when you don't have universals. Then, so of poverty, so the structural reasons, so all the surplus value goes on one side to Kalamazoo, and then on the other side of the Kalamazoo, on the railroad station, on the north side, nothing remains. So then following Christian doctrine. Now, what does that Christian doctrine mean? The Roman Catholic Church has a great advantage. The 50 years after Marx, religious people are slow learners. So 50 years it took them. They found out that something was wrong with capitalism and with industrial capitalism. So Ketteler, Bishop Ketteler of Mainz, had already started. He was a lawyer and became a priest, and then he saw the horror and he wrote things 50 years earlier. But as far as the Vatican is concerned, it was Leo XIII, a rather humanistic person, who then wrote this Rerum Novarum. Every encyclical letter starts with a Latin word. That becomes the name of the encyclical, Rerum Novarum, new things. So they were not new 50 years before already. Marx had seen it all. And before Marx, they had other people who had seen it. And even Adam Smith did not only read one book, which sometimes we read, namely The Wealth of Nations, but he had before that already written another book about the moral sentiments, namely how one controls one's damned creed, which brought us in 2008 into this catastrophe. And the Chinese recently, who have given us billions of dollars to get out of this mess, a communistic country pays a capitalistic country to get out of its mess, said we should not only read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, but we should read also The other one on morality, and we had not read any of them, but the second one at least we have practiced. We do practice Adam Smith, and yesterday Adam Smith was affirmed again, but reaffirmed again. But not Adam Smith, but Friedman of the Chicago School, the opposite of Keynesianism, which we had before and to which we went back under Obama again, and now because of yesterday, it's possible that we follow again this idiotic thing of Friedman and Reagan there about deregulation and so on, which of course lets the greed go personally and structurally to the ceiling again. So we have then another catastrophe like 2008, particularly because Obama did not nationalize, as Bush had recommended. He did not nationalize, and George Soros too, did not nationalize the banks and the industry, but the debts of the banks and the industry, with billions and billions of taxpayers' money, which come from the working class. And all that was affirmed yesterday. That was why it was a catastrophe. So the Christian doctrine is that Rerum Novarum was the first encyclical letter, and then 40 years later there was another encyclical. Every 40 years they write one, and that was Quadragesimo Anno. So that means 40 years after Rerum Novarum they wrote a new one, because capitalism is developing, of course. It becomes more and more intense. It becomes more and more capitalistic every 5 minutes. So therefore they wrote another one, and from this Rerum Novarum then, the Roosevelt people, that means the second Roosevelt, announced that New Deal. When he announced in the speech, he had no clue what the New Deal was. But then he got together social workers and some wild tycoons, capitalistic tycoons, and let them struggle with each other. And they came up with some kind of a program out of which Social Security and so on came. That is Roosevelt liberalism. That is the only chance the workers had yesterday, in which they voted down. The other one is the opposite. It is conservative, we call it, or right wing, or it is really neoliberalism, which goes not only back behind the second Roosevelt, but the first Roosevelt already, who was vice mayor of Manhattan, of New York, when the southern lower part of Manhattan, all the people in the tenement houses, which were hellish, marched up to the upper Manhattan and burned down their landlords' houses and hanged them all. And it was Roosevelt then, the first Roosevelt, who, because McKinley was an assassin, all our good people are assassins, so he wasn't supposed to do anything, but they made him only vice president so that he would shut up. But now the president was killed, so then Roosevelt came into power, and now he went against Carnegie and Rockefeller and so on, and pulled them all for the court and dismantled all the monopolies. That was an unbelievable thing. So this neoliberalism here goes back behind the first Roosevelt into the 19th and 18th century. That's how far they are back, and that is what came back yesterday. That is the catastrophe. So now but we are where we are. That means, as an educator, you know, when you educate people, you know, they make a little step forward and bong, then they fall back again to the chimpanzees. So you have to pull them up again, and there will be new possibilities. They have to suffer again. So if you cannot think, you have to suffer. I always taught that to my children. It didn't help very much, but at least I hoped it would help. So nevertheless, it would be nicer if one could think things through and would save oneself suffering. Now, what they voted in yesterday, they will have to suffer miserably for it. So, but that is the way how Providence lets us be educated from animality, the long march, to freedom until we finally get it. That's very hopeful and very optimistic. Okay, so that is the Christian doctrine. It is the natural law position. So therefore, when the Pope says that, nobody in America understands a word. Because the question, the doctrine there, this natural law position, was an Aristotelian and a Stoic position which the Church Fathers baptized. So it is a baptized natural law position. And the teaching of the Church is that what you heard in the Sermon on the Mount, or what you see in the Torah, or in the Catholic tradition or so, that this agrees with the natural law. The natural law we can know by reason. The other one, the Sermon on the Mount, we get by faith. But faith and reason are not contradictory to each other. That means we could really know what is true if we could really think well. But because we cannot think well, we need another revelation. Then we don't have to think it, we can just believe it. But the content, no, the form is different, but the content is the same thing. You should not murder is there revealed, and you should not murder is part of the natural law position. So the natural law position, very, very simple, is based on the psychology, unfortunately the Aristotelian psychology, which Skinner has long buried. So on this, that we have certain inclinations, the inclination to life, for instance, and that is universal, that we all have the same nature, black, white, green, whatever we are. And so we all have this inclination. This inclination is the basis for longing, also for rights. So that means we have a longing for, or we have the inclination to live, therefore we have the right to life, right? That clings familiar, right? That's the Catholic position, right to life. It's a natural law position. And on the other side, you have the duty to live. Now Dr. Corkian and so on. You have the duty to live, you cannot commit suicide and so on. You have the longing to get married, and therefore you have the right to get married, and you have the duty to get married. The whole attack against spinsters and so on in old times had something to do with that. And celibacy is a precarious suspension of this natural law in the Catholic Church, and it has become a curse. So therefore, the Pope should do something about it as fast as possible. So then there is the inclination to know the truth, but not historical truths, chemical truths, physical truths, what we teach on campus, and we don't even talk about truth anymore. But it is the absolute truth. That means the absolute universal, which contains everything, is that what everybody has an inclination to and the right to know, which our students' rights are violated here, and the duty to find a way to this truth. And the last one is to the inclination to have friends and the right to have friends. You should never be isolated. And the duty to cultivate friends, to go to Colonial Kitchen and cultivate friends. So that is the natural law position. And out of this, that has been connected then with political economics, which Adam Smith had invented and which Marx had criticized and so on. But both are political economists. And so Nell Bräuning was a great Jesuit in Frankfurt when I studied there, and the Pope has also studied in Frankfurt. There's a great Jesuit school there. Nell Bräuning was recognized by socialists and by capitalists and so on, and had an influence also on committees in the Bonn Republic and Berlin Republic and so on. Became over 100 years old. It's very healthy. Natural law position keeps you alive for a long time. Okay, so that is the Christian doctrine. Now, on the Protestant side, there is something like a type of evangelical type of socialism. There were Niebuhr, for instance, and Tillich and so on. They were in this movement. It's very quiet about it. We had a nephew of the Bergen, son of one Bergen, nephew of the other one. They studied here in K College. They studied with you, and they were also in town here. I don't know if he's still here and worked with our people in the slums and so on. So, and that comes from the Bergen brothers, who live in Baltimore and live in the slums in Baltimore and share everything with the slum people. There's a whole group, ex-lawyers and so on, who also fought against armament. They banged against rockets here in Michigan and were continually in prison. So Daniel was in prison again and again, and in the courts they had to pray an Our Father for the judge who passed the judgment. It's trespassing and so. And the other one, Philip Bergen, he left the order and married a sister, and they had 4 children, and some of them were in studied in K College. And so when she was in prison, he took care of the children. When he was in prison, then she took care of the children. Of course, we have no political prisoners in this country, and so on and so on. It is God. So he was here in K College a few years ago, I think. Daniel was here, and I had a nice talk with her at that time. So, and admired him greatly. We have unbelievably saintly people here, but the system swallows them up. I was in New York once, and I went into a basement where there was a meeting in order to protest against atomic bombs. And there was a building in New York, and there were all kinds of people. There were senators in there, there were representatives, there were people of the streets, and some of them spoke Hebrew, and it was a strange type of a gathering, and Daniel was not there yet. There was a young woman, and she organized it, and an older man said, you know, I cannot really go into this building. When they put me into prison, then I cannot work, and then I have nothing to live on. And she said, well, then you better don't go to the building. You don't have to do that. And Daniel Bergen, with his sandals on there, like St. Paul in Corinth, he came in there and he listened to it, and he said to this man, he said, look, when you go on Wednesday and go into this building and protest, then the prisons are all full. They may not even put you in anymore. And then if you also just go to the door, then they won't put you in prison. Only when you go through the door, and when you then put blood on the wall, then they will put you to prison. So you don't have to do it all, just do a little bit. So he really rescued the honor of the old man. You know, he was really recognized in his human being. He could do something without starving to death. That was a wonderful, progressive thing. So that was Daniel Bergen. Yeah, unbelievable people we have here. This is, by the way, Mahatma Gandhi, and that is Martin Luther King. That is Sermon on the Mount. You know, no weapons whatsoever, no taking another eye or whatever. On the other hand, the brothers Cardinal, who made the revolution in Nicaragua, they think that sometimes one has to use violence and so on. So we have that also with Malcolm X here, and we have that also with Martin Luther King. So that is a question, you know, about how to go against an untrue system when you have to fight it. How do you fight it? And the issue is, when you do it violently, you become so similar to that system, which is so violent. So therefore, there must be an alternative to this. Okay, so that is what the Christian doctrine means. And so what the Pope says, and that shows us what he will do, that means he will not go beyond that Christian doctrine. Has somebody gone beyond it? Yet the liberation theologians. So the question is if that doctrine is still of actuality, and then pointing at the great Jesuits under whom he studied in Germany and in Rome and so on. So, but that we can put a question mark behind there. What is in general his attitude toward the liberation theologians and so on? And by saying this, he says at the same time, not the liberation theologians, but rather the traditional Christian doctrine, which is without doubt a great accomplishment. The Pope made the remarks yesterday while addressing the World Meeting of Popular Movements, which is holding conference in Rome and so on, facing the poor and the unemployed. So to discuss problems facing the poor and the unemployed. And you're aware that what we discussed, voted yesterday, of course, we will have problems with food stamps, we will have more problems with workers' unemployment compensation, we will have more problems with the health care and so on and so on. That was all voted in yesterday, and nobody around the globe has any clue whatsoever what we have done again. So we better get in consensus with the rest of the world. Calling for the movements to keep up the fight for workers' rights. That is not right to work, right? That is something else. This state here is a working class state. And in this state, a year ago or whatever, they brought in that right to work law, which has also been affirmed yesterday by the election, by leaving the governor in. So that makes it very hard for the union. It is an anti-union type of a measure. It does not outlaw the unions, but the employer will not, like Western, will not collect the fees anymore, but Western continues to do the fees. They just don't obey the thing. That's a very good thing. But I just wrote a little note to all my colleagues why they should continue to pay the dues, because they can stop paying the dues now and still are protected by the union. The union has to stand up for them in spite of the fact that they don't pay anything and so on. So in Ohio the same thing has happened. So this shows, of course, that is neoliberalism, right? To like my old aunt in Rochester would say, these were the good old times when we didn't have any union in Rochester yet. So that was good times. So, but where this is coming from, it must have something to do with the island situation. The two oceans must have somehow protected us. But they didn't protect the Canadians somehow. They made it into the world, so something has happened to us, and we better get to it, what has happened really. So workers' rights, the Pope said, let's say together that we have to ask all these Catholic colleges who don't have unions yet, and so they have to be called upon too. The Pope said, let's say together with our heart, no family without roof, so that is his new thing there, that's also expressionism. No family without a roof, no peasant farmer without land, no worker without rights, no person without dignified labor. So that is his program. So that shows that is rather the middle of what we wanted to do here. Then Newsweek magazine is back in print or whatever, I don't know, that has nothing to do with it. But Francis distanced himself from communism. Now, that is of course true now. So what is he distancing from? He is, as a man of a monastic order, has the vow of poverty, and so he is of course a communist. The early church was communistic, but it didn't remain communistic. So later they introduced private property again. Even Epicure, who is the saint of Marx and who was a materialist, was not for cancellation of private property. So we have private property since about 10,000 years. It came with agriculture, and out of private property came then the class differentiation, and it came the so-called just wars, where you steal, of course, rubber from Vietnam, and you steal the coffee from El Salvador, and you steal the oil from Iraq, and so on and so on. So that all has to do with private property. So therefore, to cancel private property of the means of production, that means not your house, not your car, not consumer goods, not anything what has use value, but rather things which have exchange value. So if you rent out your house and so on, then it becomes, but not even, I went to Tito once in Yugoslavia with my friends of the critical theorists there, and he suggested that he should allow the 1 million workers, Yugoslav workers in Germany who earned a lot and then sent the money back home, and to allow them to have small businesses, so a little restaurant or a little ice cream store, what we call the low middle class, or what we call the middle class, the hardworking middle class, or whatever. It's the low middle class. It's a medieval type of an institution still, and it's the source of fascism usually. So, but we had a discussion with him, and he didn't want to do it. He said, when you start out with these little guys, sooner or later one eats up the others and becomes bigger and bigger, and then hell is loose like it is in America, and we don't want to have this. So we didn't get through with it, and then, of course, the Germans and the Vatican and the CIA split the whole country because the socialists did not want to take the Germans wanted to follow our model. We usually take our machines to the cheap labor in the colonies, and Latin America and the Philippines and our colonies, so we took it there. Now 12 million are coming here. That is unusual, and that's why everybody shouts, except the capitalists. Capitalists are happy with it. But the Germans wanted to follow us. They always brought the workers into the country, forced labor into the Second World War. Concentration camps were labor camps. Every concentration camp was connected with the corporation, IG Farben, Siemens, and so on. So that's where the cheap labor came from. So they became only later, they became death camps. They became death camps only with Pearl Harbor, because Hitler had predicted that if the Jewish high finance, that's Rothschild from Frankfurt, is now in Paris and New York, if Rothschild will initiate once more a brotherly war among the European, the Aryan nations, then that will not be the end of Europe, it will be the end of the Jewish race. And that happened in Pearl Harbor when he had to declare war against the United States after he had declared war against the Slavic world, the most idiotic thing, because there was a non-aggression pact with Japan and Mussolini. If one of them was attacked, then one had to side with him. Now, the Americans don't think that they were attacked, we think we were attacked. It was before we were attacked, we strangled Japan in the Pacific. and they were sitting on the little island and became more and more strangled up, and that was an attempt to break out of the strangulation. And it is very well possible that Washington knew about the whole Pearl Harbor thing. So I expected something like that, at least. So therefore, according to the fascist interpretation, we had attacked Japan, and Japan could do nothing else than to break out of that encirclement. And therefore, he had to declare war. He was not prepared for that. He was not even prepared for the attack of the Soviet Union. Okay, so nevertheless, this is our thing there with let me go where we there, announcement. Okay, so no, let me go to this program. So yes, the issue was with this communism. So that he is against communism. So this thing there, the Christian doctrine, is called solidarism. It's called Catholic solidarism. And this Catholic solidarism moves between liberalism on one side and communism on the other side. So it is supposed to be an alternative. And this alternative then does not cancel private property. So that is the difference between the Catholic doctrine and communism. That is also the difference between the social democratic parties or the labor parties, which let the capitalists have their property, but try to tax them, for instance, tax their hands out of them, and so on. So that's what they do in Germany, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and so on and so on. So that means there are socialists who do not want to be communists, and there are socialists who want to be communists. So all these social democracies and labor parties and so on in England, they don't want to overthrow the capitalistic system. They're not revolutionaries, they're reformists. And they think that when technology goes up and then the worker will trickle down to him and so on and so on, that is how they want to settle it. And then there are others. So the Pope would have an easier time with socialism of these social democracies and so on, but he does not want to have communism. That means he does not think that one should cancel the private property of the means of production. One should rather talk to the owners, Siemens and so on, so that they are fair, that they allow labor unions, that they obey the social laws. In Germany, you have that on a very high level. Volkswagen went to one of our southern states, and southern states didn't want to have labor unions. The Germans right away say, then we go home again. Pulled the whole thing up and went home again. So that means they try to discipline us. That is necessary. The difference between the worker now and the serf and the slave is that there is a set of social laws which protect the worker. But you need an organization like the labor union to reinforce that. That is why I founded the labor union here on campus 30 years ago. So, and I'm very happy about this. And it would be hellish if we hadn't done this. So that means you have to, told the faculty that they should pay, and that this is the best investment for social justice which they could possibly make. So, but you have to be watchful continually, and you have to have a weapon like strike. So we struck different times. The Senate, where we went tonight, before we came here, has no power. So there's a rubber stamp thing. They all need a good president, shake hands and so on, and then, but they cannot resist or prevent things from happening and so on. So that's what we unfortunately had to do several times. So, but that is what the Pope he would be for labor unions, for social democracies, but he is not for communism. That means he is not for the liquidation of the property. Japan, and Japan could do nothing else than to break out of that encirclement, and therefore he had to declare war. He was not prepared for that. He was not even prepared for the attack of the Soviet Union. Okay, so nevertheless, this is our thing there with let me go where we there, announcement. Okay, so no, let me go to this program. So yes, the issue was with this communism, so that he is against communism. So this thing there, the Christian doctrine, is called solidarism. It's called Catholic solidarism. And this Catholic solidarism moves between liberalism on one side and communism on the other side. So it is supposed to be an alternative. And this alternative then does not cancel private property. So that is the difference between the Catholic doctrine and communism. That is also the difference between the social democratic parties or the labor parties, which let the capitalists have their property, but try to tax them, for instance, tax their hands out of them, and so on. So that's what they do in Germany, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and so on and so on. So that means there are socialists who do not want to be communists, and there are socialists who want to be communists. So all these social democracies and labor parties and so on in England, they don't want to overthrow the capitalistic system. They're not revolutionaries, they're reformists. And they think that when technology goes up and then the worker will trickle down to him and so on, that is how they want to settle it. And then there are others. So the Pope would have an easier time with socialism of these social democracies and so on, but he does not want to have communism. That means he does not think that one should cancel the private property of the means of production. One should rather talk to the owners, Siemens and so on, so that they are fair, that they allow labor unions, that they obey the social laws. In Germany, you have that on a very high level. Volkswagen went to one of our southern states, and southern states didn't want to have labor unions. The Germans right away say, then we go home again. Pulled the whole thing up and went home again. So that means they try to discipline us. That is necessary. The difference between the worker now and the serf and the slave is that there is a set of social laws which protect the worker. But you need an organization like the labor union to reinforce that. That is why I founded the labor union here on campus 30 years ago. So, and I'm very happy about this. And it would be hellish if we hadn't done this. So that means you have to, told the faculty that they should pay, and that this is the best investment for social justice which they could possibly make. So, but you have to be watchful continually, and you have to have a weapon like strike. So we struck different times. The Senate, where we went tonight, before we came here, has no power. So there's a rubber stamp thing. They all need a good president, shake hands and so on, and then, but they cannot resist or prevent things from happening and so on. So that's what we unfortunately had to do several times. So, but that is what the Pope he would be for labor unions, for social democracies, but he is not for communism. That means he is not for the liquidation of the poverty. That means more specifically the poverty of the means of production machinery, by which you can employ other people and take the surplus value from them, like $75, and you give them 25 or whatever. So that is, if you want to stop the surplus value, you have to take the machinery away from them, and it would have to be owned by the workers who work with them and to produce the wealth. Capitalist doesn't produce any wealth. He manipulates it, but he doesn't produce it. So, but the election yesterday shows that we are, of course, miles away from all this. And so that is why they called the Pope a communist, and then they called Obama a communist, and of course, none of them is a communist. Okay, then police derived from the church doctrine rather than leftist ideology. So if he means with leftist ideology, the word ideology we have to explain a little bit. For Americans, ideology means a combination of ideas and values, and there's nothing wrong with it. But if in the critical way, as the rest of the world uses it, then it means false consciousness, like what happened yesterday. It means masking of national and class interests, and it means simply the untruth. So if you call, in the critical sense, somebody an ideologue, then you say he's a liar. So therefore, one should not say that Reagan is an ideologue, but one should say that Reagan came in with, he was a labor union leader first and then converted, that he came in with a certain philosophy. I think we owe it to everybody to take him, first of all, seriously. Only when you see then that all this deregulation then leads to this disaster from 2008, then you can say it was the untruth, and then you can call it an ideology. But one has to be very careful with this. So land, roof, and work, it's art, but for some, if I talk about these subjects, it turns out the Pope is a communist, Franz Script. So, not like we have it here, this calling people these names. The fact that the love for the poor is in the center of the gospel is misunderstood. And Romero had that too all the time, the gospel is misunderstood and so on. But I don't think the fascist government in El Salvador, just some of our people went there. You know, El Salvador is a fascist country, so, but they have no problem with that. So, nevertheless, they always, Romero always said the fascists misunderstand that, but I don't think they misunderstand it. I think they know very well what it means. No capitalist can enter the kingdom of God. You cannot serve capital and God. You will either love God and hate capital, or love capital and hate God, and so on and so on and so on. And so on. It goes through the whole thing. Jesus, you can even see how he provoked the ruling class, Roman and Jews at the same time, and how he said, and you want to kill me, you know, you are not the children of Abraham because you are murderers, you want to kill me, you are not the children of Yahweh, you want to kill me, and so on. And you can see how it becomes more and more intense under the Good Friday and so on. Well, the last act was when he threw the capitalists out of the temple. That was broke the camel's back. I have a new book coming out exactly with this beautiful picture where Jesus throws all the capitalists out of Wall Street. He also stayed straight into the political saying that grassroots movements around the world express the urgent need to revitalize democracies. Now, this is a strange thing because the Roman Catholic Church could not be further away from democracy. The only trace of democracy in the Catholic Church is that the son of a worker can become Francis I. That is about it, where it begins and where it ends. And so on. Otherwise, it is of course, it's a kingdom of some kind, and it's an aristocracy with the cardinals and the bishops and so on. So, and it has become an extremely authoritarian type of a thing, which the fascists like very much. Hitler thought that only authoritarian church religion could be a genuine one. So the Pope remarks follow years of speculation about his political affiliation in the wake of a number of public demands that governments redistribute social benefits. So that is restitute. So the struggle, which yesterday was unbelievably violated and shows how far we are away from this. So that means there's a double struggle. The one struggle is for the redistribution of wealth. And when you say this, they say right away you must be a communist. And the other one is much more important even, and that is the struggle for recognition of the humanity of people. I remember Romney left on the microphone one night and they had a discussion, and then it said something that if 49% of welfare loafers or whatever, that is the contempt, the disrespect which the upper bourgeoisie has toward the lower bourgeoisie and the 200 million working class and 250 million working class. So that means what is wrong is there is no adequate distribution of wealth, but there are whole stratas of society which are held in utter contempt, and which usually in the country clubs this contempt can be expressed. That shows all the brothers who are the brothers of the club. But outside, they wouldn't say that. It would be too inflammatory. So therefore, they are shut up. But they left the microphone on, so it came out. So that the majority of our people are really respected in what they do, that if they drive a bus, that this is something worthwhile, that one doesn't look down on people because they haven't gone to college and all this stuff. And, that you have to go to private schools in order to be somebody, otherwise you're nothing, and so on and so on. There's no end to it.
It was 47.
47%.
47%. He was more kind. Wasn't quite
Okay.
49.
That's kind of it. Okay, then there is something here he attacked Pope, attacked unfettered capitalism. In a speech prompting the conservative U.S. radio host Rush Limbaugh, the super genius, to brand his proposals for government redistribution of wealth as Marxism and socialism and so on. He has also no clue what that is. The Pope responded to the allegations in an interview with the Italian newspaper La Stampa shortly afterwards and condemned the far-left ideology outright. So I think if we say his position is the Roman Catholic social encyclical letters, from this point of view they are critical of liberalism, but they would not cancel private property. And they are also critical of Marxism because they cancel private property and because they think they are atheists. In reality, Marx is probably a Spinozist. That means a follower of Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza, who was a Jew and who was excommunicated from the synagogue in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, and is still that, because at the time of Marx and before, you could say when you were friendly and nice, you would call it pantheism. But when you were nasty, you would call it atheism. So, but what it means is it is an extreme obedience to the second and the third commandment. That means the prohibition against making images of the absolute. So Spinoza is extremely Jewish in that sense, and so is Freud and Marx, that they deny all images which are used in religions. So like father or king or providence or whatever, these are all names from our finite life, and all finite languages are insufficient to express the infinite. Therefore, all these statements which we make in the churches are all wrong. But we are bound to our language. We cannot break out of it, and it is finite. And so we have to use finite images, and the Islamic brothers have 99 names for Allah. And the Jews have also, they have this law that there should be no names, but when you read Psalm 92, for instance, you have at least 4 names for God in the first verse already. So, so that means on one side, we know that there is no adequate name or image. On the other hand, we cannot really live without names and images, at least as normal people, the philosophers can, but we can't, and so on. So therefore, if you say pantheism, that means you say an indeterminate universal which embraces us all and holds us together, but it can be in no way particularized, and that you have with the Jewish El Shaddai or Yahweh or Elohim, and you have it also with Allah, and you have it also with Rousseau and Voltaire's deism as well. This God is also very indeterminate, and he has even no relationships to people, to their everyday life. He has made the world and left it behind. That is deism, which we have, in our civil religion and so on. So, therefore, when we call it atheism, which the Pope would say they are atheists, that can also be called Spinozism, and Spinoza has developed an unbelievably high ethical positions and so on. So one cannot simply use that negative word, atheism, and so, or it has to be very careful what that really should mean. So, but nevertheless, my friend Walter Dirks studied the thing, a good Catholic, and he thought that Marx followed, as a philosopher, followed Spinoza. But when he looked at the bourgeois religion, which we have in London or here in Kalamazoo and so on, then he would be atheistic, and Freud as well, because these images which we use, they are totally inadequate. Marxist ideology is wrong, he would say, so that is exactly this middle position. He would also say liberalism is wrong as well. They're both wrong, and then Catholic solidarism is what is right. But I have met many Marxists in my life who are good people. Now that is progress. So it must have been in Brazil. And so I don't feel offended when I'm called a communist or so. There is nothing in the exhortation that cannot be found in the social doctrine of the church, and there he calls the Marxists closet Christians. Closet Christians. That is a very good thing. His teacher, Karl Rahner, also did a little bit smarter. He called them the anonymous Christians. So there are people who say they are Christians and they are really not. There are phony characters running out. But then there are also those who say, I'm not a believer or whatever, and they can be more Christian than the Christians are. they can follow the Sermon on the Mount much better. So let's take a very little example. The president of Russia, instead of punishing us again, we punished him and closed some banks or accounts, and so he could have done the same thing. Maybe he did the same thing, but a week ago he made a treaty with Kiev right at the same time when the three republics in the east are separating, and about natural gas, so that people in Poland and in Germany will not freeze to death during the summer, so during the winter coming up. So, I mean, this is a very nice thing. That is somewhat holding up the other cheek. They're kicking around and want to punish him, and turn their own gas off, and not noticing it. So, nevertheless, he made that treaty, and they will have their gas now, at least for the winter. I don't know when he will turn it off, but he may turn it off someday. But one has to be grateful for little things which happen, and that is nice gesture. So in a separate interview, he even joked that communists are closet Christians who had simply appropriated elements of Christian thought, and we just showed what he had appropriated from everybody according to his ability to everybody according to his need. Marx has appropriated this and many other things. For Marx, Christianity was the religion of the king, of the child. And he said we can forgive Christianity a lot. It's support of slaveholders, it's support of feudal lords, it's support of capitalists. But we can forgive Christianity because they gave us the religion of the child. They gave us a child. So, and he loved children, he loved his own 5 children, and he educated them well. By the way, he took them to church, also in London, the Catholic church there, and for the music. He liked the church music, and his children asked what the music was all about. And he said, well, there was once a poor man, a carpenter, and the rich people murdered him. That is a better Christology than many of us have. So we wrote about this in a Harvard thing there. Okay, so that may be enough. There are the other problems which we don't have to go in here, but there is Farrell there from Newsweek, Italy correspondent, said that it is difficult to know where the Pope stands as Francis comments on a number of issues. This journalist must never have heard of Jesuitism. Jesuitism. There you have a character. He knows what Jesuitism is. It's a lack of consistency. That's a very unique way to translate Jesuitism, a lack of consistency. Well, but seriously now, what will he do? So whatever issue you take, whether it's Holy Communion for divorced couples, abortion, contraception, the treatment of homosexuals, even whether or not we should go to war in the Middle East to defend Christians, it's difficult to see where he really does stand. Well, I mean, he does stand in a somewhat, as well as, you see, Protestants think either or, Catholic thinks as well as. So he would say that homosexuality is a sin, but you should hate the sin and love the sinner. That confuses every Protestant. Comes from Augustine, who is the father of Roman Catholicism. So I think it has something to do with that method, where also modern people, particularly non-dialectical people, and we have repressed dialectics in the Great Depression, therefore nobody has it, we're all positivists. So therefore, when somebody acts dialectically as well as, then we think we have to drop one side and can only hold on up to one, so that you can say homosexuality is a sin, at the same time you can say, who am I to judge? And we have to love our brothers. It's, for the American brain, it's hard, because we still have the old Aristotelian logic, because we never took the new logic of Hegel, the first new logic after Aristotle. So A is A, B is B. But that A can also B, and that both of them can be C, it's unimaginable for us. That's why we lost the Vietnam War, because we had a dialectician, Giap, as an opponent. That's why we lose now, because we have the Bad generals who have been trained by the same Russian teacher. So we did this, we repressed dialectics because we thought that it would destabilize people's consciousness during the Great Depression. And we did not reintroduce it again after the Great Depression. And maybe we should think if one should not do that again. So the Pope has it. And if people call it Jesuitism, then they are a little bit critical of Jesuits. So maybe one shouldn't use that word. Maybe it's better to be inconsistent. Okay. But all these questions are there too, and the issue is what will he do? But it is quite foreseeable what he will do. So with these divorced couples there, he holds on to the gospel, and he wants to be loving to all the divorced people who are sitting in his church. He sees that many people get married the second time, and it goes very well, and they help each other and love each other and so on, and therefore he thinks these are good people. Now, the question is how he gets this together now. So Jesus says nobody should divorce anybody. Who divorces a woman makes her an adulteress. Whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So therefore you cannot do anything about this. So the guys who sit there in the church now, they live adultery. So how do you get over this to give them communion in spite of the fact that they have committed adultery or are in the process of it? Was Judas there? Did he receive communion? And so on and so on. So our fundamental method should be that we go through the argumentation of religious people and we go through the argumentation of modern people, and the better argument should win. But we would, when we are critical of him, we have to show him a way how he can remain faithful to the Gospels, as the Protestants always say we should be, and on the other hand, how he can be loving to all these people who now have their second marriage and it works out well and they help each other. By the way, that they help each other is also important for him with the homosexuals. If the homosexuals live together and they help each other and they go to the hospital with each other and so on, that weighs a lot for him. There is also the idea that one cannot be, like the Gospel said, what we read there, perfect like the Heavenly Father and so on, that one cannot be perfect right away, but that this is a slow process. And in that process, it may not be so entirely perfect then, and it may be tremendously imperfect and inadequate. So there is room for all this massive inadequacy which we experience in our lives all the time, because we are on the way, so it is a journey. They would even think about celibacy that way. They would say, you are not celibate right away. You become only slowly become more universalistic in your love, more embracing in your love. The question is only what are you doing on the way when you are not there yet? And that is where the child abuse cases come in and innumerable other miserable things. So that Hans Küng, when we were sitting once at the Wine River and drinking wine there, and a messenger came and said that the young priest had committed suicide and because he couldn't settle the affair, he had this promise of celibacy, which is not a vow, by the way, and then he fell in love and he couldn't settle it and killed himself. And I had experienced something just a few years earlier in a parish in northern Germany where a young fellow priest hanged himself during the midnight mass, Christmas, in the tower up there because he had a relationship very complicated, but he couldn't solve it. So, and so Hans Küng, after sitting there for half an hour saying nothing, and he talks all the time, but he didn't say anything anymore, and he said, it is a curse, it is a curse, and that's what it is. So not everything can be settled in this as well as, it is not that simple. So there's the homosexual thing as well, and then the war there in the Middle East to defend Christians or whatever, that he of course wants to defend Christians, but he doesn't want to have another crusade or whatever. So how do you get the balance between those things and to stop people from burning Christian churches? these churches in Egypt and so on, they are, by the way, not burned because they are Christian, they are burned because they are symbols of modernity. See, there comes our other universal again. They are symbols of the West. And so one could untangle that, that they are not Western, but they are also an Eastern religion, then maybe something could be changed. So although it sounds good in theory, in practice he's just washing his hands of the issue. So that would be a real Jesuitism then, and we have to see, what we have. There is this whole chapter, what he did in Brazil, which is not clarified yet. Brazil we had fascists there like we had in Nicaragua. We still have them in Nicaragua, the Arena Party, fascist party. And he was promoted during this time to the head of the Jesuit order. He did not help the priests who were persecuted by the fascists, like Romero was, and we want to see the Jesuits there who were killed today, and the next time we can look at this, who were his brothers. So he was not volunteering for martyrdom, which, by the way, one doesn't have to do. No Christian has to volunteer for martyrdom. You just have to stand up if they catch you. So, and they didn't catch him, but I think I mentioned that he had two priests there particularly, and they were both very critical of him, and one was still, and I think he died there, but the other celebrated a mass with him in Frankfurt, and they reconciled afterwards. So the priest forgave him that he was not standing where he was supposed to stand. That means he cooperated with the fascists and CIA. That is, one has to, they will dig into that sooner or later, and so did the cardinal in Managua, who was paid by the CIA and so on. So we have to see that in the overall class struggle to where people in El Salvador, they rose against the fascists who take fascism as a protector of capitalism. Fascism is corporatism. Fascism is the cooperation between government and corporations, which we are very close here to, and we voted for it yesterday. So, that is the class struggle, and the question is where the church stands in this class struggle. And the liberation theologians made a decision because of Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt was a political theologian, was Hitler's jurist and Hitler's political theologian, and so Metz opposed him and developed a theology, political theology on the side of the workers, not on the side of the capitalists. And they met, by the way. Schmitt did not want to be denazified. He did not want to be. He remained a fascist. So did Heidegger. Heidegger's black books have come out, and it's very clear that he was even more fascist than all my friends here who admire him always think. So Eliade, who is the grandfather of our department, was also fascist. He never changed. Sigurd Jung was a fascist, but he did change. So we have to become much more critical here about those people, because they are not only the person is fascist, but the theory is okay. There's fascism in Sigurd Jung's individuation psychology. There's fascism in Eliade's religiology. There's fascism in Heidegger's philosophy from the first day on. He was a Jesuit, by the way, Heidegger. He studied under the Jesuits, but dropped out in Pullach in Munich. He studied Catholicism and fascism. But that was the last time that this traditional theology, that we are on the side of the capitalists or the feudal or the slaveholders, to another one, theology was on the side of the slaves, the serfs, or the wage laborers. And so the Pope has to find his way between the two, and Romero never made it completely to the liberation side. Since his priests were killed, he went toward that side, but he never made it completely. So, and they forgot in Rome. Recently, I met some guy, cardinal from Africa, and he said they were working on it to reevaluate Romero, but they want to forget him, Okay, so that is the struggle where the church stands in this, in the class struggle, which is global, which is worldwide, which is in Africa, which is in the Near East. I think we have this capitalism, we have to think about this too, to what extent ISIS and the Muslim brotherhood, to what extent they have not only a military side, a political side, but also a social side, where they identify with the poor, with the uneducated, and when the Israelis mow down their houses and so on, and their olive trees, then they give the money, wherever that comes from. Hezbollah does that in Lebanon, and they all do that. And that makes them very popular, so that when they have a vote, you don't have to wait the vote. They really vote for those people because of the good things which they do. Right? So that is the thing which we have to see when we want to conquer with them. I think we have to see all three components. Okay, so that is enough, I think, today. Let me say this last. Oh yes, we wanted to say the last time something about monasticism, mysticism, asceticism. Just one word, it came up in the end. Monasticism, mysticism, and that does not come from Iran, from Islam, it does not come from Christianity, it doesn't come from Judaism. It comes from the East, it comes from Hinduism and Buddhism. So the Vedas, for instance, and the Bhagavad Gita and so on, when you read that, you will see there is this mystical element very strong in it and so on. Well, how did it come in? Now, there is something very strange about these three Abrahamic religions, including this here, this church and so on. And that is the parousia delay. That means the Jews wait already for 2,800 years for the Messiah. The Christians wait for 2,000 years for the return of the Messiah. The Muslims wait already for 1,400 years for the Jesus Messiah, and he does not come. That is the open flank, the most painful open flank of all three Abrahamic religions, into which all kinds of atheists can drive with their big tank and tear to pieces. So, but there have been in all three religions people for whom this belief that every second of tomorrow and the day after tomorrow can be a little gate through which the Messiah can come in. Jesus has this. The Messiah comes like the thief in the night, or like these virgins who wait with their little lamps, and others don't have any lamps, and so they wait that the Messiah comes because he would come suddenly, like a thief in the night, and so on. So, but at a certain point, this parousia delay became so painful that people wanted to be one with God now, and not waiting until it comes in the year 2050 or whatever. And therefore, mysticism of Master Eckhart and Jakob Böhme and Kabbalah and the Hasidim and the Sufis and so on is an attempt to anticipate the coming which is not coming, and to be one with God now, and also to transform the world in such a way that it will be closer to the kingdom, that there will be not what we have all day long, murder, and then lies, and then robbery, and murder again, and so on. And not to make an attack like the Islamic Brothers did there with New York, there, the bombing the World Center, because that is Wall Street where the stealing takes place, and the Pentagon is where the murder takes place for the stealing, and then the White House and the Congress where the lying takes place, so that we are not stealing and we are not killing, and so on. So that is an attempt too, without any mysticism or whatever. But the mystics are people who want to make the wrong system right, and that when the Messiah comes, he only has to put his signature underneath of what we have done already. The next step is that if the Messiah only has to put his signature underneath, then it is not so important if he comes at all or not, because we have done the work already. And then you are in the bourgeois enlightenment movement. Then you are in the socialistic enlightenment movement, where people do it themselves, and it is not so important anymore if the Messiah comes or not. There you have the division, between the religious and the secular. And the secular comes out of the religious with iron consequence. And therefore it's not an arbitrary thing, to do this or that or whatever. But there is a logic involved in all of this. Okay, so that as far as mysticism, which we wanted to mention. And then capitalism came up as another universal, and we said what the essence of capitalism is. Capitalism is the private appropriation of collective labor. Socialism, communism, is the collective appropriation of collective labor. So the collective labor, which yesterday voted wrong, appropriates the collective labor. That's what they prevented themselves from yesterday. And the other one is the private appropriation of collective labor. So the collective labor produces the product, the commodity, and sells it and so on, and the capitalist gets the fruits of it and reinvests them, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger all the time, so that not even any state government can control them anymore. And that is what we have now. My friend, this guy there, what I mentioned him there, what is this fellow there, the guy, a speculator of currency speculator, Soros, yeah. Soros, I met him in Kiev, on all places in Kiev, and I wanted to have money for my course in Russia there, and he had just been bombarded by Kiev students with eggs. The eggs were still hanging on his head there, and he was not in a good mood. I didn't get anything at this time, and so on. So, but Soros is a Jew from Hungary, and his father was already a money manager, and he helped a lot of Jews leaving Hungary, but they had to pay a high price for it in order to do that. So, and the son went on, and the son of the son now continues that. So he is a billionaire, and he pulled, $6 billion out of Indonesia, and the whole market from Indonesia to Tokyo collapsed. One man, and took that money and put it into Moscow, in order to get the police up and the state power up and so on. Then wrote a book, and I don't know, write a book. He let somebody write a book why this Eastern thing did not go well. It did not go well because the Eastern states were not prepared for that capitalistic onslaught. There were no laws in place to control them, to regulate them, and so on. So they robbed the whole territory and left, and stayed there too, and masses of people were impoverished. And what you hear from Moscow now, that is the counter movement against that misery. But Soros saw it very clearly, has now pulled all its money out of Eastern Europe and has put it into Asia. He wants to do the same thing with China. What didn't work with Russia, it tries to do the same thing. But his ideal is to produce civil society. But he knows that civil society has to be regulated, policed day and night if it should not commit suicide. And he paid the first election of Obama. He didn't pay the second one because he was disappointed that Obama did not nationalize the banks, did not nationalize the industry. And he felt betrayed by this. And we will have to pay the price for Obama not doing that. But I think Obama simply did not have power among the people or in the party system to do anything like this. Other countries put all the capitalistic gangsters on trial. We should have the Bush administration, with whole the cabinet should have been put on trial, a national trial at home or sent to Den Haag. We have no national will, which came out yesterday in these elections again. And I explained that the Civil War experience, which was so horrible, the numbers is 1 million casualties, right? Because they had only counted the widows of the Union Army. They hadn't counted the widows of the Confederate Army. So they had only half of the casualties. The casualties were close to 1 million men. And we were only 40 million Americans at that time. So that is an unbelievable slaughter. And I think that this has produced a wound in the American soul, so that they give so easily in to their ruling class, no matter what they do to them. That is really something we have to reflect on it. Inside or outside the confessional, doesn't matter really. Okay, so that as far as the capitalistic thing is concerned, and I think that what we have with ISIS and so on, that is directed against Western capitalism, particularly its last phase, which is colonialism. So when capitalism doesn't find enough cheap labor anymore inside of the country, it has to go out in the colonies, it has to build empires, and the empires crash against each other. That you have 1914 and 1939 again. So you cannot talk about these world wars without capitalism, you cannot talk about fascism without capitalism, cannot talk about concentration camps without capitalism and so on. That is one of the universals which one needs in order to understand all these horrible phenomena.